The wreckage drifted in silence, a graveyard of twisted hulls and frozen corpses glittering like metal snow under a dying sun. The Council's fleet had been sent to end the threat once and for all. Instead, the threat had simply left. Not destroyed, not conquered, ignored. Captain Elias Rourke's ship, the Vagabond's Mercy, coasted through the remains. His scanners flickered with ghost signals, emergency beacons fading into static. He leaned back in his chair, scarred fingers drumming against the console, a half-empty flask of recycled whiskey clinking at his side. Another Council disaster, he muttered, watching a transmission loop of the final moments. Officers shouting, guns firing, then something huge moving through the fog of war, fast, deliberate, terrifying. Guess the big bad wolf's not interested in sheep anymore. His ship's AI, an outdated voice module named Juno, replied, "Captain, you are technically scavenging from an active Council quarantine zone." Again. "Relax, Juno. The dead don't file complaints." The Mercy's hull creaked as it pushed deeper into the field. Radiation warnings pulsed across his screens. He'd been a soldier once, fought for ideals that dissolved as quickly as the credits that paid for them. Now he just drifted where no one else dared, living off the bones of battles no one survived. Then the scanner chimed. Faint life signs, human-compatible oxygen levels. Rourke frowned. That's impossible. He adjusted the thrusters and followed the signal. It led to a small, cracked escape pod floating between the shredded remains of a dreadnought. The pod's hull was half-melted, as if something had burned through it from the outside. "Let's see what you're hiding," he murmured, locking the magnetic clamps. The airlock hissed open, releasing a sour metallic scent of blood and burnt fuel. Inside, a man lay slumped over, armor torn open, eyes glassy and lifeless. But the man wasn't what drew Rourke's attention. Curled beside the corpse was a creature, a bundle of sleek black sinew, claws folded in, breathing shallowly. It was small, maybe the size of a wolf, with plates of glistening carapace that shifted in color like oil in sunlight. Rourke froze. Every spacer in the galaxy knew that shape. The apex. The galactic nightmare. The predator. Juno's voice sharpened. "Captain Rourke, are you aware of what that is?" "Yeah," he whispered. "And if I'm lucky, it's dead." He scanned it quickly, life signs faint, but there. A wound tore across its side, leaking dark fluid that hissed when it touched air. The creature stirred weakly, one eye flickering open, silver, intelligent, and ancient. It didn't growl. It looked at him. Rourke aimed his pistol anyway. His finger hovered over the trigger. One pull, and the galaxy's most feared weapon would finally die. He'd be rich beyond measure, a hero, a legend. But something about the way it looked at him stopped him cold. There was no malice there, just exhaustion. The kind a soldier knows too well. "Hell?" he muttered. "You're not the monster they make you out to be, are you?" He holstered the weapon, grabbed a medkit, and knelt beside it. "Don't bite me and we'll call it even." The creature shivered as he sprayed sealant over its wound, its breath rattling like dry thunder. Juno protested. "Captain, Council law states any contact with classified bio-threats. Council law can kiss my ass." He carried the creature, lighter than he expected, and set it on a padded crate near the heating vents. It didn't resist. It just watched him, pupils narrowing and expanding like a camera lens. Hours passed. Rourke went about his salvage work, but he could feel it studying him. The hairs on his neck prickled each time he turned his back. At one point he caught it mimicking him, turning its claws like he turned a wrench, tilting its head when he spoke. It wasn't random behavior. It was learning. Later that night, as the ship floated in darkness, Rourke found himself sitting across from the creature, a mug of coffee in one hand and his pistol in the other. The stars outside shimmered, the only witnesses to the quiet standoff. "You know," he said softly, "the whole galaxy's been chasing you for centuries. Fleets burn, planets vanish. They say you kill for sport. But I've seen war. I know the difference between a killer and a survivor." The creature blinked once. Slowly, it leaned forward, resting its head on its claws, almost human in its weariness. Rourke smirked. "Guess that makes two of us." He took another sip and leaned back in his chair. The hum of the engines filled the silence. For the first time in years he didn't feel alone. When sleep finally took him, it was deep and dreamless. The lights flickered once, then dimmed. Somewhere in the lower deck, a hatch hissed open. The creature moved silently, its form blending into shadow. It prowled the narrow corridors, studying the ship, the hum of power, the smell of steel, the echo of Rourke's heartbeat through the walls. It stopped at the cockpit, where the stars stretched infinite and bright beyond the viewport. It pressed one clawed hand against the glass, eyes reflecting the swirling nebulae beyond. Then it turned its gaze back toward the sleeping human. In its species, memory was instinct, every sensation recorded, every scent preserved. The human's scent, oil, metal, and warmth, was unlike anything it had known. Not prey. Not threat. Something else. It crept closer, silent as breath. For a long moment it just watched him. Then, with almost delicate precision, it curled up in the corner of the room, tail wrapped tight, silver eyes half closing. When Rourke woke the next morning, the creature was gone. The crate was empty, the airlock sealed. No trace, no sound, just the faint scent of ozone in the air. He sighed, rubbing his temples. Figures. Even monsters know when to leave. Then he noticed the control console. Deep in the metal, 4 shallow marks carved clean through the alloy. Rourke traced them with his thumb. The marks weren't random, they formed a pattern. A symbol. Not alien script, but something eerily human. 4 lines. One across the others. He frowned. A cross. Juno's sensors chirped suddenly. Captain, unknown movement detected outside the hull. Rourke turned to the viewport. Beyond the ship, in the black sea of space, something massive shifted, a shadow within shadows. 2 glowing eyes blinked once, like distant stars, before vanishing into the void. The hair on his arms stood on end. Juno, he whispered, did you see that? I saw nothing, Captain. He leaned back slowly, heart pounding. Somewhere deep in the dark, something was watching. The galaxy had chased the predator for millennia. It had never stayed, never lingered, never cared. Until now. The transmission log flickered back to life on his console, one final message from the doomed fleet he'd scavenged earlier. A terrified voice crackled through the static. It's not after us. It's not hunting. It's following someone. Rourke's gaze shifted to the viewport again, where the stars pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. Yeah, he muttered. And I've got a bad feeling who that someone is. He reached for his flask, took a long drink, and smiled to himself with grim humor. Great. The universe finally noticed me. The vagabond's mercy drifted onward through the sea of stars, unaware that from that moment on, the deadliest being in existence would never again let its captain out of its sight. And far behind them, in the endless dark, the predator watched, silent, patient, and for the first time in its long existence, no longer alone. The hum of the ship was the only sound left after the silence of realization. Captain Elias Rourke sat in the cockpit of the Vagabond's Mercy, staring out at the bruised sky of hyperspace. His knuckles were white around a mug of stale coffee, his mind replaying the last 24 hours, the wreckage, the wounded creature, those silver eyes watching him in the dark. He'd seen a lot in his years, wars, massacres, the slow collapse of humanity's alliances, but nothing haunted him like that look. The look of something that chose not to kill him. Juno's voice broke the stillness. Captain, you haven't slept. I don't sleep well when I'm famous, he muttered. The council has raised a bounty. 3 million credits for any verifiable trace of the predator. And incidentally, a smaller one for any ship last logged near the incident site. Namely, us. Rourke groaned, rubbing his face. 3 million for the beast and what, 10,000 for me? 6,000, Juno corrected cheerfully. He snorted. Guess I'm officially worth less than a corpse. The console beeped, a proximity alert. Something had tripped the lower cargo sensors. He froze. No, someone. He grabbed his pistol and crept down the ladder, every sound amplified in the still air. The lights flickered, and his shadow stretched across the corridor. He turned the corner, then stopped. There it was. The creature was crouched near the engine coolant vents, staring into the flickering light like it was fire. Its wound had healed almost completely, flesh knitting with unnatural speed. Its form seemed larger, more defined, plates shifting across its shoulders like living armor. Well, Rourke said quietly, lowering the pistol a fraction. You didn't leave after all. The creature tilted its head. It recognized his voice. Rourke kept his movements slow, deliberate, like a man trying to earn the trust of a feral animal. If you're planning to eat me, you'd better wait until payday. I taste better with debt. The creature blinked, unamused, and then extended one claw to tap a nearby console. The gesture wasn't random. It traced lines, coordinates. Rourke's heart skipped. It had accessed the star maps. Somehow it knew what they meant. You understand this? He asked. It turned its head toward him, eyes glinting. Then, in a low, distorted growl that barely resembled speech, it uttered a single syllable, rough, halting, but unmistakable. Who, man? Rourke nearly dropped his gun. You can talk. The creature's gaze didn't waver. Who, man? It repeated, then tapped its chest. Karath. Rourke stared, mind racing. Karath? That's your name. It didn't answer in words, but the subtle lift of its head was enough. Rourke nodded slowly. All right, Karath. I'm Elias Rourke. You can call me, well, whatever passes for friendly in your vocabulary. For a moment there was silence, then a faint vibration echoed through the hall. Another ship was closing in. Juno's alarm blared from the speakers. Incoming vessels, 2 signatures. Identification, Private Scavenger Guild, armed. Scavengers, Rourke muttered. Great timing. He sprinted to the bridge. Through the viewport, 2 bulky ships appeared from hyperspace, their weapons already primed. The comm crackled to life with a sneering voice. This is Captain Veron of the Profit Margin. Power down your engines and prepare for inspection. We're claiming this zone for the guild. Rourke grinned bitterly. You boys always show up when I find something interesting. Then hand it over, Veron replied. You're outnumbered and your ship looks like it's held together with duct tape. Rourke muted the channel. Juno, warm up the cannons. Captain, with respect, our cannons are decorative. Then make them loudly decorative. He swung the ship into a defensive arc, firing bursts of plasma. The scavengers returned fire, shaking the hull with concussive blasts. Panels sparked, lights dimmed. Then, in the middle of the chaos, Karath appeared beside him. Silent, poised, eyes burning with an ancient calm. What are you doing? Rourke shouted over the alarms. The creature moved to the viewport, its claws flexing against the glass. Then it roared, not a sound of rage but something deeper, primal, vibrating through the metal itself. Outside, the scavenger ships faltered as if struck by unseen force. Their systems flickered, energy signatures spiking erratically. Juno, what the hell was that? Unknown resonance. The creature's roar just disrupted their targeting systems. Rourke grinned. Remind me never to play poker against it. He grabbed the controls, steering the Mercy through the sudden confusion. One scavenger ship collided with a drifting hull fragment, the other veered off, losing lock. Rourke gunned the engines and escaped into hyperspace, stars stretching into lines of light. When they were finally clear, he exhaled and turned to Karath. Guess that makes us even. The Predator simply stared at him, unblinking. Then, slowly, it extended one clawed hand toward him, not in threat but in mimicry of a handshake. Rourke hesitated, then clasped its massive forearm. The creature's skin was cool and dense, muscles like coiled wire beneath. You're full of surprises, he said. Who, man? Karath replied again, the word softer this time, almost reverent. Later, in the dim glow of the galley, Rourke sat across from it, nursing another mug of coffee while the creature studied a holographic map of the galaxy. Every so often, its eyes flicked toward him. You know, Rourke said, most of the galaxy thinks you're a weapon that got bored of killing. Karath's gaze dropped. It reached toward the projection and highlighted hundreds of red zones, each representing a destroyed fleet or ravaged planet. Its claws trembled slightly as if ashamed. Then it drew a circle around one small blue world. Rourke leaned forward. You know that place? Karath tilted its head, then touched Rourke's chest with one claw, tracing the outline of a heartbeat. You feel it? Rourke murmured. You remember something about us. The creature didn't answer, but the silence spoke volumes. Juno's voice broke in. Captain, incoming council transmission. Priority level, red. Rourke frowned. Patch it through. A hologram flickered to life, a council admiral in polished armor, eyes cold as steel. Captain Elias Rourke, you are in possession of a Class Omega biological entity. You will surrender it immediately or face obliteration under Directive 47. Directive 47, Rourke said dryly. Is that the one where you nuke anything you don't understand? The admiral's jaw tightened. That thing beside you has annihilated civilizations. You cannot control it. Rourke looked at Karath, who stood silently behind him. Maybe not. But from where I'm standing, it seems more civilized than your council. The transmission cut. Alarms blared again, missile locks, 3 ships incoming. Rourke slammed the thrusters, the ship lurching into evasive maneuvers. Karath moved to the viewport again, body tensing. Energy gathered along its armor plates, light rippling like molten glass. Don't do anything stupid, Rourke warned. Karath turned its head, eyes glowing with silent promise. Then it released the energy in a single pulse. The Mercy shuddered as a shockwave burst outward, rippling through the void. The incoming missiles disintegrated mid-flight. The pursuing ships lost propulsion and drifted lifelessly into the dark. Rourke stared. You just disabled them. Not destroyed. The creature's gaze met his. Who, man? Rourke realized with a slow chill that it wasn't a statement, it was imitation. It had chosen restraint. It had seen him spare it and now it mirrored that mercy. He swallowed hard, the weight of it settling in. The galaxy's apex predator, engineered for death, was learning compassion from a human. Hours later, after the adrenaline ebbed, Rourke sat at his bunk recording a log entry. His voice was quiet, rough around the edges. Captain's log. I don't know what this thing really is. The Council calls it a nightmare. The fleets that fought it call it death. But when I look at it, I see something else. Something lost. Like it's searching for a reason to stop running. He paused, glancing at the creature curled near the doorway, asleep yet alert, its breathing slow and steady. Maybe that's what we have in common, he whispered. We're both just trying to find somewhere we don't have to run from anymore. Outside, the stars wheeled past in infinite silence. The ship drifted through them like a ghost, two exiles sharing the same endless sky. And somewhere deep within the hum of the engines, the Predator dreamed for the first time in centuries, not of blood but of a human voice calling it by name. The council chamber floated above the shining core of Arcturon Prime, a cathedral of glass and light that reflected its leaders' vanity more than their wisdom. 12 figures surrounded a holographic projection of the galaxy, where a crimson mark pulsed, an expanding radius of destruction and silence. Entire sectors were vanishing from communication grids. Fleets sent to intercept never returned. At the center of the growing void was one impossible pattern, the last known coordinates of Captain Elias Rourke and the creature they had hunted for centuries. The Predator has changed its behavior, said Admiral Keth Voren, his voice sharp as a blade. It's no longer attacking at random. Traveling. Purposefully. Across the table, Dr. Viren, a xenobiologist with weary eyes, leaned forward. No, not traveling. Following. Our surveillance logs show a consistent vector trail matching one vessel, the Vagabond's Mercy. That's a human ship. A murmur rippled through the chamber. The Admiral scowled. You're suggesting the galaxy's most dangerous weapon is playing bodyguard to a scavenger? I'm suggesting, Viren said carefully, that the Predator has made a choice. The silence that followed was suffocating. The Council's high speaker finally spoke, her voice icy with contempt. Terminate them both. We cannot risk contamination. Humanity has a history of corrupting what it touches. And with that the order was sealed. Far from Arcturon Prime, the Vagabond's Mercy drifted in the shadow of a dying star. Rourke sat at the navigation console, staring at the faint static haze of Council frequencies. He had intercepted enough to know they were coming. He'd faced death before, but this time it wasn't just his life on the line, it was something bigger, something he couldn't yet name. Karath sat beside him, motionless, eyes fixed on the same starlit horizon. The faint glow under its armor pulsed in rhythm with the ship's engines, as if it had synced its heartbeat with the vessels. They're coming for us, Rourke said quietly. Whole fleets, probably. Karath turned its gaze to him, silver eyes gleaming with unspoken understanding. Rourke sighed. You could leave. You move faster than light when you want to. You don't owe me anything. For a long moment, Karath didn't move. Then, with slow deliberation, it reached out and placed one clawed hand over Rourke's chest, where his heart beat beneath the fabric of his flight suit. Human, it said, softer now, more fluent. Then after a pause, stay. The word hit him harder than any threat could. Stay. The galaxy's most efficient killer wanted to remain at his side. Rourke looked down, unable to find words, until Juno's voice interrupted. Captain, 3 Council destroyers incoming. They've locked onto our signal. Guess that's our cue. Rourke straightened, flicking switches, adrenaline chasing away the weight in his chest. Juno, scramble all frequencies. Karath, whatever you did last time, get ready to do it again. The void outside erupted in flashes of blue fire as the destroyers closed in. The Mercy lurched under impact, alarms blaring. Karath stood tall, claws flexing, energy coursing along its body like liquid lightning. The first wave of missiles streaked toward them. Rourke gritted his teeth, bracing for impact, but before they struck, Karath moved. It raised one arm and an invisible shockwave burst outward, rippling space itself. The missiles disintegrated in silence, their fragments scattering like sparks. Rourke stole a glance at the creature. It wasn't just defending, it was choosing not to kill. Every motion was measured restraint, power harnessed with precision instead of rage. Inside the lead destroyer, Admiral Voran watched the impossible play out on his command screen. "It's shielding the human ship," he whispered. "It's protecting him." "Sir?" his lieutenant asked. Voran's jaw tightened. "Then we'll destroy them both." Outside, the destroyers regrouped and fired in unison, beams converging into a white-hot spear of energy. It struck the Mercy dead-on, ripping through its outer plating. The ship groaned under the force, systems flaring red. Rourke slammed his hands on the console. "We can't take another hit." Karath turned toward him, its entire frame glowing brighter now, the light almost blinding. "Go," it said, voice low, the syllable grinding against its throat. No, Rourke's voice cracked. "I'm not leaving you." Karath took a step closer, towering over him, then lowered its head until their eyes met. "Who man? Survive." It moved before Rourke could stop it, tearing open the airlock door with a shriek of metal. The creature launched itself into the void, vanishing in a burst of silver light. Rourke stumbled to the viewport just in time to see Karath streak toward the destroyers like a meteor. The first ship's shields collapsed under the impact, its hull folding inward as the creature tore through it with unstoppable momentum. The second ship opened fire, but the blasts ricocheted harmlessly off Karatha's armor. Rourke's throat tightened. He'd seen what war looked like: chaos, blood, revenge, but this wasn't war. This was devotion. Karath didn't annihilate the fleet. It disabled their reactors, crippled their weapons, then left them adrift. And when it returned, it landed heavily on the Mercy's hull, its armor dimmed, its breathing ragged. Rourke raced to the airlock, pulling it back inside. The heat radiating off its body singed his arms, but he didn't care. "You stupid, magnificent bastard," he muttered, trying to stabilize it with what few medical supplies he had. Karatha's eyes flickered open. "Safe?" it rasped. "Yeah," Rourke whispered. "We're safe. For now." It relaxed, exhaling a sound that was almost a sigh. Rourke sat beside it, the silence between them heavy and fragile. Outside, the disabled destroyers drifted like carcasses in the void. Then a faint transmission crackled through the static, a council broadcast. The high speaker's voice, cold and clear. "The apex predator no longer hunts. It obeys. It protects a human. This contamination cannot be allowed to spread. The council will convene to authorize full planetary purges in affected sectors." Rourke stared at the words burning on the console screen. "Planetary purges?" His hands clenched. "They're going to wipe out anyone who's even seen us." Karath stirred weakly. "Council, kill?" "Yeah," Rourke said bitterly. "That's what they do when they're scared." The creature's gaze hardened, silver flaring in its eyes. "No more run." Rourke looked at it, understanding dawning like a storm breaking. "You want to fight back?" Karath nodded once. He exhaled slowly, mind spinning. He'd spent his life running, from duty, from politics, from people, but this was different. For the first time he wasn't just surviving. He was standing for something. "All right then," he said quietly. "If they want a monster, let's give them one." He set the ship's course for a neutral system on the outer rim, one that wouldn't show up on council charts. As the engines roared to life, Karatha's hand brushed against the console, imprinting a faint energy mark that pulsed in sync with the ship's power core. "What did you just do?" Rourke asked. "Link," Karath murmured. "Together." Rourke managed a faint smile. "You just married us by accident, didn't you?" Karath tilted its head, confused by the idiom, but its eyes softened. As the ship sped away, the faint glow of the linked energy filled the cockpit, wrapping them both in a light that felt strangely alive. Rourke leaned back in his chair, exhaustion pulling at his body, but his mind was sharper than ever. The council thought they could control fear. They didn't understand that fear could turn into loyalty. Somewhere in the vast quiet between stars, the galaxy shifted. Rumors began to spread among traders and smugglers, tales of a human vessel that traveled with the shadow of the apex beside it, a beast that no longer hunted worlds but hunted those who tried to hurt its companion. In the council chambers, the leaders whispered of rebellion and contamination. In backwater cantinas, miners toasted to the human who tamed death itself. And in the heart of his ship, Rourke simply stared out at the stars, the faint reflection of Karatha's silver eyes glowing beside him. He didn't know what the future held. But as the stars stretched into streaks of light and the Mercy disappeared into hyperspace, he finally understood what it meant to stop running. For the first time in his life, Elias Rourke had something worth fighting for. And for the first time in its long, lonely existence, the Predator had someone worth following. The vagabond's mercy emerged from hyperspace into the fractured remains of a forgotten world. Once a thriving research outpost, it now drifted in silence, its shattered moons reflecting the cold light of a dying sun. Rourke leaned forward in the pilot's chair, jaw tightening as debris thudded gently against the hull. Karath stood beside him, motionless, scanning the void through the viewport. "This place looks dead," Juno muttered from the comm station. "Why here, Captain?" Rourke didn't answer immediately. His gaze lingered on the distant wreckage, a ring of orbital stations surrounding a hollowed planet. "Because dead places don't draw attention," he said finally. "And because this used to be Council property. Before they scrubbed it from every map." Karatha's voice rumbled low. "Hidden truth?" "Yeah," Rourke said, powering down the main thrusters. "Hidden truth." He rose, grabbing a rifle and a scanner pack. "We need data, something we can use against them. Council purges don't happen without authorization logs. If we can expose that, prove they're slaughtering civilians, they'll lose control of the narrative." Juno frowned. "Captain, even if you find that, who'll believe you? You're a wanted man with a monster for a friend." Rourke glanced at Karath. "Then we make them believe." The landing was rough. The planet's surface was little more than ash and cracked obsidian plains, scattered with the bones of an ancient city. Twisted spires jutted from the ground like broken teeth, their metal frames humming faintly with residual energy. The silence pressed down heavy, like the world itself had forgotten how to breathe. Karath moved first, leading with instinctive precision. Every step was deliberate, its massive form scanning for threats invisible to human senses. Rourke followed close, his eyes sweeping across scorched walls and broken consoles, their displays still flickering with ghostly light. They reached what looked like a central archive buried beneath layers of collapsed steel. Rourke knelt beside a half-buried console and brushed away the dust. The interface sputtered to life, lines of alien script crawling across the screen. "Come on," he muttered, fingers flying over the keys. "Show me something useful." Karath stood guard, silent and alert. When Rourke finally accessed the core data stream, his breath caught. Rows of files appeared, Council purge authorizations, entire planetary populations marked as contaminated. The timestamps were recent. Too recent. He opened one file at random. The footage showed a Council strike team executing civilians under the guise of containment. His chest tightened as he read the reason: suspected contact with unauthorized entities, designation, human and apex. Karath approached, its eyes glowing faintly as it scanned the data. "Council, kill all?" Rourke nodded grimly. "They're wiping out everyone who's even heard of us." A tremor ran through the floor. Karath turned sharply, its claws extending, body tensing. "We are not alone," it growled. Moments later, the air filled with the screech of engines. A formation of Council drones descended through the broken sky, red optics glowing like malevolent suns. Rourke yanked the data core from the terminal and shoved it into his pack. "Move," he barked. They sprinted through the ruins as plasma fire rained down, scorching the ground behind them. Karath leapt across the rubble in great, fluid strides, shielding Rourke from the blasts. When one drone dove low, Karath caught it midair and crushed it with one hand, the metal shrieking under its grip. Rourke slid behind a fallen column, rifle raised. They must have traced the power signature from the archive. "Then they know," Karath said. "No more hiding." Rourke glanced at it, sweat streaking his face. "You mean fight back?" Karath nodded once, slow and certain. "Together." The word hung between them like an oath. Rourke inhaled sharply and rose, firing burst after burst at the advancing drones. Karath surged forward, a blur of motion, its claws slicing through machines like paper. Energy surged through the ruins as the creature unleashed a concussive blast that vaporized a dozen drones in a single shockwave. But for every drone destroyed, more appeared. The sky filled with them, hundreds now, descending in perfect formation. Rourke's ammo counter flashed red. "We're surrounded." Karatha's energy dimmed slightly, its breath heavy. "Not yet." It raised both arms, summoning a pulse of white-blue light that illuminated the ruins. The shockwave shattered the ground, tearing through drone ranks and sending molten shards into the air. But even Karath staggered afterward, its body flickering, armor cracked. Rourke caught its arm, steadying it. "You're burning out." Karatha's eyes dimmed briefly. "Worth you." The words hit him harder than any weapon could. "You're not dying for me," he snapped. "Not here. Not like this." A sudden explosion threw them both back as a massive shadow descended through the clouds. A Council warship, The Dominion's wrath hovered above the ruins, its cannons glowing with lethal energy. Elias Rourke, a voice boomed from the ship's loudspeakers, cold and triumphant. By decree of the Galactic Council, you are charged with contamination and treason. Surrender the apex entity, and you will be granted a swift execution. Rourke spat blood, glaring up at the looming vessel. Yeah, not really in the mood for mercy today. Karath growled, its voice deepening, resonant with something primal. Council dies, or we do. Rourke met its gaze and smiled grimly. Then let's make it a good death. They ran for cover as the ship opened fire, plasma bolts tearing the landscape apart. Karath leapt skyward, slamming into the vessel's underbelly, claws digging deep into the metal. Sparks exploded as it ripped through the hull, tearing into the power conduits. Rourke sprinted toward a fallen console, fingers flying across controls. He rerouted the energy from the planet's old reactor grid into a pulse generator. Come on, come on. Above him, Karath roared, the sound echoing like thunder. The warship reeled under its assault, trying to shake the creature loose. It succeeded. Karath was hurled downward, crashing into the ruins with enough force to crater the ground. Karath. Rourke ran to its side. The creature stirred weakly, energy sputtering. And this, Karath rasped. Rourke looked up at the pulse generator, its power building toward overload. His eyes widened. If I trigger it now, it'll fry everything within 10 kilometers, including you. Karath met his gaze. Do it. Rourke's hands trembled. He'd fought too hard, come too far. But in Karath's eyes he saw no fear, only trust. He nodded once. Together. Karath managed a faint smile. Together. Rourke slammed his hand on the activation pad. The pulse detonated in a blinding wave of light, tearing through the atmosphere. Drones disintegrated midair, and the Dominion's wrath split apart as its systems overloaded. The explosion rippled outward, erasing everything in its path. When the light faded, the world was silent again. Rourke lay amid the smoking ruins, coughing weakly, ears ringing. The sky was clear now, fragments of the destroyed warship raining down like falling stars. He forced himself upright, pain lancing through his side. Karath? There was no answer. Only the faint crackle of static from his comm. He stumbled through the debris until he found the crater where Karath had fallen. The creature's body was still, armor scorched and cracked. Rourke dropped to his knees beside it, pressing a trembling hand to its chest. For a terrible moment there was nothing. No pulse, no glow, nothing but silence. Then, faintly, a light flickered beneath its ribs. A heartbeat. Slow but there. Rourke exhaled shakily. You stubborn bastard. He dragged himself closer, resting a hand on its arm. We did it, he murmured. They'll know now. The truth's out there. They can't hide it anymore. Karath's eyes opened, dim but alive. Human, safe. Rourke smiled tiredly. For now. Karath's claws flexed weakly, and it reached toward him, resting a hand over his chest, the same gesture it had made when they first met. Its voice was barely a whisper. Stay. Rourke gripped its hand tightly. Always. Above them, the remnants of the Council fleet burned out of orbit. Across the galaxy, their communications collapsed as data from the archive spread through black channels, exposing their crimes to every world they ruled. The Council's control began to fracture. Rourke stared up at the stars, the edges of his vision dimming from exhaustion. The war wasn't over. Not even close. But for the first time the galaxy was listening. And somewhere in that vast, cold expanse, the apex that had once ignored the universe had found its reason to fight, for a human who refused to abandon it. Rourke's voice broke the silence, soft but steady. You followed me this far, Karath. Let's see how far we can make it together. The wind whispered through the ruins, carrying their words into the endless dark as the stars blinked faintly overhead, silent witnesses to a bond the galaxy would never understand, but could never again ignore. The stars above the burned planet bled crimson from the fires of the Council's dying ships. The galaxy's silence, once peaceful, now felt charged with consequence. Every beacon that once sang the Council's anthem had fallen silent. But Elias Rourke knew it wouldn't last. Silence in this galaxy always preceded another war. The Vagabond's Mercy limped through the void, her hull charred and her engines barely functional. Inside, the air smelled of burnt metal and ozone. Rourke moved between flickering consoles, his fingers stained with grease and blood. Karath sat nearby, still recovering, its armor cracked and dull, each breath deep and deliberate. You shouldn't be up, Rourke said, glancing at the creature as he patched another cable. You're healing slower. Karath tilted its head. We share pain. Your wounds slow me. He froze. Share? What do you mean share? When Link made, Karath said slowly as though translating alien thought into fragile human language, our essence joined. I feel you. You feel me. Rourke stared at it, realization dawning like ice water down his spine. The link Karath formed wasn't symbolic, it was literal. A merging of consciousness. So if I die... Karath interrupted softly. We die. The weight of that truth pressed on him. He'd once thought of Karath as a companion, an anomaly in a violent universe. But now he understood, their fates were no longer separate. The galaxy's most feared predator had tethered its existence to his. Juno's voice crackled weakly through the damaged intercom. Captain, incoming transmission. You're going to want to hear this. Rourke frowned and limped to the console. Static filled the air before a voice cut through, familiar, venomous. Captain Rourke. This is High Speaker Sereth of the Galactic Council. Your defiance has cost us dearly. Worlds burn, order collapses, and now chaos spreads across the spiral. Congratulations, you've made yourself the most dangerous man alive. Rourke leaned closer to the mic, glad to know my reputation's catching up. Sereth's tone sharpened. Surrender the creature. In return I will spare your homeworld. Earth remains under Council jurisdiction, for now. But if you continue this rebellion, it will be ash by dawn. Rourke's pulse froze. The word hit him like a weapon. You wouldn't, he said, but the tremor in his voice betrayed doubt. Sereth's response was cold and certain. You've seen what we're capable of. The transmission ended. For a moment, only the ship's broken hum filled the air. Then Rourke slammed his fist against the console. They're going to hit Earth, Karath. Millions of lives. Karath's eyes narrowed. We go. Rourke hesitated. You're not ready. Neither am I. Karath rose to its full height, towering, defiant. We're joined. Fight together or all die. He stared at the creature, at the dull glow returning slowly to its chest, and nodded. Then we fight. Hours later, the Mercy dropped out of hyperspace on the edge of Sol. The familiar blue curve of Earth shimmered beneath a field of Council dreadnoughts, an entire fleet encircling the planet like vultures. At their center floated a monstrous flagship, the Judicator's Will, a city-sized warship pulsing with energy. Rourke's throat went dry. That's suicide, he murmured. Karath's claws dug into the deck, energy crackling faintly across its body. Then we die free. Rourke smiled faintly, a spark of reckless humanity glinting in his eyes. Couldn't have said it better myself. The Mercy plunged forward, engines screaming as Rourke pushed them past their limits. Enemy sensors locked on immediately. Missiles streaked toward them in silver arcs. Karath extended one hand toward the viewport, and a shimmering barrier flared around the ship. The first volley detonated harmlessly against it. Rourke gritted his teeth. That's new. Link stronger, Karath said. You fuel me. Then let's make it count. They weaved through the gauntlet of fire, Rourke's hands moving instinctively over the controls. The ship shuddered with each near miss. Karath stood motionless beside him, feeding energy through the link. Rourke felt it, not just the power but Karath's calm fury, a steady rhythm pulsing beneath his own heartbeat. They broke through the blockade, hurtling straight toward the flagship. Juno, Rourke shouted into the comms, lock everything we've got onto that ship's core. If we're going down, we're taking them with us. Juno's voice cracked through static. Captain, that'll overload our reactor. Yeah, Rourke said with a grim smile, that's the idea. As they neared the Judicator's Will, the flagship's hangars opened, releasing squadrons of fighters. Karath's eyes blazed silver. My turn. Before Rourke could respond, Karath tore open the ship's airlock and launched itself into space. Its form expanded, armor glowing brighter than any star. It collided with the first wave of fighters, ripping through them like a blade through water. Explosions rippled across the void, each one reflecting in Rourke's eyes. Damn it, Karath, Rourke whispered, hands trembling over the controls. Don't you dare leave me again. He steered the Mercy into the flagship's shadow, skimming its hull until he found a weak point near the reactor conduits. He fired the ship's remaining plasma torpedoes. The hull cracked open, spilling molten light into space. Then Karath landed beside the breach, claws digging into the torn metal. Its voice echoed through the comm link, deep and steady. Elias. Now. Rourke hesitated, sweat beading on his forehead. If I trigger this overload, it'll take you with it. Karath's tone softened. We are one. You cannot live if the galaxy dies under them. Finish this. The words carried the weight of finality. Rourke closed his eyes. He saw flashes, Karath shielding him on Harkos 4, bleeding in the void above Archeron, sitting silently beside him in the cockpit's dim light. It wasn't just a creature anymore. It was a friend. He opened his eyes, filled with resolve. Not yet. We finish it together. He slammed the throttle forward and dove the Mercy into the gaping wound of the flagship. The hull screamed in protest as he forced the dying ship deeper, engines melting, alarms howling. He could feel Karath through the link, every surge of energy, every flicker of pain. Now! Karath roared. Rourke hit the detonation sequence. The reactor ignited, a sun blooming from within the Judicator's will. The explosion consumed the dreadnought and tore through the surrounding fleet, a cascade of destruction that rippled across orbit. For a heartbeat, everything vanished into light. When the shockwave cleared, Earth still hung below, untouched. The Council Armada was gone, erased in a storm of their own making. The wreckage drifted silently through space. Among it, a single flare of energy pulsed faintly, the Mercy's emergency beacon. Inside the shattered cockpit, Rourke gasped for breath. Smoke filled his lungs, blood streaked his temple. Karath, he croaked. A faint glow flickered beside him. The creature lay half buried in debris, its armor blackened and cracked, but its eyes still alive. We live, it whispered. Rourke laughed weakly, the sound half a sob. Barely. Karath turned its head toward him, a faint smile curling its alien features. You fight like Predator. Rourke managed a breathless chuckle. Took lessons from the best. He leaned back, staring out at the wreckage, a field of light and ruin stretching toward infinity. The stars had never looked so calm. Across the galaxy, the Council's grip faltered. Worlds once silent began to rebel. The broadcast of the Judicator's will's destruction spread faster than the Council could suppress it. To some, it was a myth, a story about a human who tamed death itself. To others it was a warning. On the quiet bridge of the broken Mercy, Rourke looked at Karath and said softly, "You could have ruled this galaxy." Karatha's silver eyes reflected the distant Earth. "I follow, where heart leads." Rourke smiled faintly, exhaustion closing in. "Then let's go home." He reached out, resting his hand against Karatha's arm. The creature's energy pulsed once, enveloping them both in faint light. The stars seemed to shift around them, the wreckage fading, the silence returning to peace. In that final, weightless moment, man and monster were indistinguishable, two beings bound by loyalty, defiance, and something far greater than fear. As the Mercy drifted toward the blue horizon of Earth, the galaxy's oldest predator and its most stubborn human slept side by side, symbols of a truth no council decree could ever erase, that even in a universe built on power and fear, the strongest bond was not dominance but devotion. And as the stars dimmed behind them, the legend of the human and the predator began its long journey across the void, carried in whispers, in stories, and in the trembling hearts of those who still dared to hope.